Today, we're going to look at 7 horror stories involving the experience of renting a house in the middle of nowhere. Imagine looking for a peaceful retreat, far from the city, and ending up trapped in scary situations that no one expected. Get ready for tense and suspenseful stories, where isolation and the unknown turn what would be a rest into a real nightmare. We're going to explore stories based on real events, showing that sometimes the silence of the countryside can hide unimaginable dangers. So, settle in, check if the doors are properly locked, and let's start this spine-chilling journey. Oh, and before something strange appears at your window, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave a like. This helps the channel a lot and ensures that you don't miss any scary content like this. Let's go. 1. The house with closed windows. The Norwegian countryside, early March 2023. Winter had not yet let up when 4 friends, Lucas, Mariana, Andre, and Sophia, decided to rent a country house for a weekend of rest and isolation. The idea was simple: to disconnect from the world, enjoy the fireplace, cook together, and record everything for the video channel they had been running since university. The house's advertisement promised comfort, privacy, and a spectacular view of the frozen lake, miles from the nearest town. The arrival was uneventful. The host, a middle-aged man named Eric, left the key under the doormat and sent a friendly message wishing them a pleasant stay. The group was enchanted by the setting. Snow covered the roof, tall trees all around, and absolute silence, broken only by the biting wind. Upon entering, they noticed that the house was spacious, with rustic furniture, a roaring fireplace, and a well-equipped kitchen. Everything seemed perfect until small details began to catch their attention. On the first night, while exploring the place, Lucas noticed that all the windows had reinforced locks on the outside, some with padlocks and iron bars. Mariana, when trying to open a window to air out the room, noticed that the glass was double-glazed and would not move. Sophia found a discreet camera in the corner of the room, pointed at the sofa. Andre, searching the hallway, found another camera built into a smoke detector. The group laughed nervously, convinced that it was just excessive Nordic security, but the feeling of unease set in. On the second day, the tension increased. The cell phone signal was non-existent, and the house's Wi-Fi only worked in a few rooms, dropping out constantly. When they tried to go out for a walk, they realized that the front door was stuck, as if it had been locked from the outside. The windows, even when forced, would not budge. They tried to contact Eric, but the messages were not delivered. The previously desired climate of isolation now seemed like a trap. During the afternoon, while reviewing the footage from the channel's camera, Lucas noticed something strange. In one of the videos recorded the night before, a shadow passed quickly through the hallway, behind Mariana, who swore she had been alone. The group began to review the previous recordings and noticed that, at various moments, objects changed places, doors appeared ajar, and in one scene, it was possible to clearly see a hand closing the basement door. Fear set in when, at dusk, the lights began to fail. The power system seemed to be remotely controlled, switching between rooms and leaving the group in patches of total darkness. Andre, trying to remain calm, suggested that they all stay together in the main room. But when they went to get blankets from the bedroom, they found the door locked. Within minutes, they realized they were being separated. Mariana and Sophia were trapped in the kitchen, while Lucas and Andre were blocked in the living room. Eric's voice echoed through the house's PA system, cold and calculated. "You shouldn't have tampered with the cameras. Now, each of you will learn the value of silence." The group panicked. They tried to break down doors and windows, but all exits were blocked. Meanwhile, hidden cameras transmitted every movement to some unknown location. During the early hours of the morning, the terror reached its peak. Lucas heard heavy footsteps in the attic and, upon investigating, found an open trapdoor and recent boot prints in the dust. In the basement, Andre found boxes with personal items from other guests, cell phones, wallets, diaries, all dating back to the last 3 years. One of the diaries read, "If anyone finds this, do not trust the host. He controls everything. He never lets anyone out." As they tried to come up with an escape plan, Eric began to manipulate the heating, alternating between suffocating heat and extreme cold, pushing the group to their physical and psychological limits. Mariana, desperate, tried to break one of the cameras, but immediately heard the host's voice threatening. Every attempt at resistance only makes things worse. The next morning, Sophia managed to access the house's electrical panel and, with Andre's help, cut the main power, deactivating part of the electronic locks. The group gathered in the living room, but Eric was already inside the house, armed with a knife and dressed in hunting clothes. He knew every corner, every hiding place, and used the surveillance system to his advantage, anticipating the victim's movements. The fight was brutal. Lucas managed to hit Eric with a chair, while Mariana and Sophia ran to the back door, now unlocked after the power outage. The group fled through the snow, barefoot and injured, until they reached the main road, where they were found by a passing truck driver. The police were called and, upon searching the house, found evidence of other crimes, videos, diaries, and personal belongings of missing guests. The case gained international attention, being considered one of the most disturbing cases involving rental homes in isolated areas. Eric disappeared into the forest and was never captured. The house was sealed off, but residents still report lights on and figures in the windows. For Lucas, Mariana, Andre, and Sophia, the experience left deep scars and the certainty that behind the promises of privacy and rest, the worst nightmares can hide, and that sometimes the biggest mistake is to trust in isolation. 2. The Invisible Host. Scotland, Highlands, September 2024. Laura and Michael, a couple in their early 30s, decided to rent a remote cabin to escape the stress of the city and try to reconnect with their relationship. The listing promised complete seclusion, mountain views, and total privacy, exactly what they were looking for. The owner, identified only as Mr. McGregor, sent detailed instructions upon arrival, saying that he would not be present but that everything would be ready for them. The road to the cabin was long and winding, surrounded by pine trees and cliffs. The GPS failed a few miles from their destination, forcing the couple to follow makeshift signs that gave the name of the property. When they finally arrived, they found a sturdy wooden house surrounded by tall grass and old trees. The silence was absolute, interrupted only by the wind and the distant sound of a stream. As soon as she walked in, Laura felt an uneasy feeling that was hard to explain. The cabin was cozy but overly clean, as if no one actually lived there. There were security cameras visible from outside, just in case, according to the listing, and reinforced locks on all the doors and windows. Michael laughed it off as a paranoid Scotsman, but Laura didn't relax. On the first night, while they were having dinner, Laura received an anonymous text message. "Did you like the food? The wine is good." Michael thought it was a joke from a friend, but Laura felt a chill. The messages continued, describing details of what they were doing. "Nice choice of movie. You look tired. Be careful with the fireplace. The rug is flammable." The couple turned off their phones, but the messages started arriving on the home's tablet, then on the smart TV, always without identification. While exploring the cabin for hidden cameras, Michael found a small ventilation grate behind the living room bookcase. Removing the cover revealed a narrow, dark hallway that seemed to run through the entire house behind the walls. A terrified Laura realized they were being watched from inside. The couple heard faint footsteps coming from the attic, but upon investigating, they found only empty boxes and a strong, musty smell. The next morning they decided to leave, but the car wouldn't start. The tank, which had been full upon arrival, was now empty. Michael tried to call for help, but there was no cell phone signal. The road was blocked by a fallen tree that hadn't been there the night before. The isolation that had once been desired was now a trap. The tension grew when Laura, while taking a shower, noticed that the bathroom mirror was hot to the touch. Behind it, she discovered a camera with exposed wires. Michael, rummaging through the attic, found an old mattress, food wrappers, dirty men's clothing, and a diary filled with notes about previous guests, schedules, habits, fears, full names. On every page, the same signature, McGregor. The messages became threatening. "You're not leaving. I can see everything. Try to run, but I know where you are." At night, they heard knocking on the walls, footsteps in the ceiling, and whispers coming from the ventilation ducts. Michael tried to block the secret passages with furniture, but realized there were more entrances than he had imagined. Laura found fingernail marks in the wood behind the closet, as if someone had tried to escape there before. The couple began to sleep in shifts, but fatigue and fear were undermining their sanity. One morning, Michael woke up with the feeling that he was being watched. He saw, through the reflection of the window, a thin, dirty figure crawling through the secret corridor, with fixed eyes and a disturbing smile. He screamed, but the figure disappeared behind a false wall. Laura, in panic, suggested trying to escape through the forest, even though she didn't know the way. The next morning, as they pretended to make coffee, Laura noticed a camera moving behind a painting. She turned off the power to the house, hoping to disrupt the surveillance system, but this only intensified the harassment. Doors began to slam on their own, electronic locks activated, and the sound of McGregor's voice echoed over the PA system. "No one leaves without my permission." Desperate, the couple used tools found in the garage to break open one of the reinforced windows. They managed to open a crack and, with effort, escaped outside. They ran through the forest, guided only by the sound of the stream. Behind them, they heard shouts and the sound of hurried footsteps, but they did not look back. They were found hours later, exhausted and injured, by a farmer who was patrolling the area. The police were called, and upon investigating the cabin, found secret passages, diaries, recordings of dozens of guests and signs that the owner was living hidden in the walls, spying on and terrorizing those who rented the place. McGregor was never found, and the cabin was sealed. The case gained international attention, becoming a warning to travelers about the dangers of renting isolated properties without checking their origin. For Laura and Michael, the experience left deep scars and the certainty that, even in the middle of nowhere, danger could be just a few inches away, watching, waiting, ready to strike when least expected. 3. The Cottage of the Missing. French Alps, October 2023. Clara, Joao, Helena, and Marco, longtime friends, decided to rent a secluded chalet in a small mountain village for a weekend of relaxation. The ad promised tranquility, a fireplace, hiking trails, and a breathtaking view. The chalet, with its dark wood and small windows, was miles from the nearest village, surrounded by pine trees and accessible only by a winding dirt road. It seemed like the perfect place to relax and disconnect from the world. On their first night exploring the house, Helena found an old diary hidden under a loose floorboard in the bedroom. The diary had belonged to a previous guest and, in stained and scribbled pages, described the mysterious disappearances of tourists in the area. The accounts spoke of hikes on trails that ended in unexplained disappearances, of strange sounds coming from the forest, and of a local resident, known only as the Watcher, who observed visitors from afar. At first, the group thought it was just a local legend, something to scare tourists. But the next day, they began to notice disturbing signs. Fresh footprints in the snow around the cabin, boot prints that didn't belong to any of them, and broken branches near the windows. Clara noticed that the back door, which had previously been locked, was ajar at dawn. Marco, exploring the trail behind the cabin, found a woman's bracelet partially buried in the mud, still damp, as if it had been left there recently. Tensions rose when they tried to use their cell phones to order food or notify family members, but there was no signal. The cabin's Wi-Fi, advertised as functional, did not connect to any device. Joao suggested it was just a technical problem, but Helena, increasingly nervous, insisted that something was wrong. During the night, they heard footsteps outside, and shadows moved among the trees, always on the periphery of their field of vision. On the third night, Marco disappeared. He went out to collect firewood and never returned. The group searched for hours, shouting his name through the forest, but all they found were drag marks in the snow and a torn cap stuck to a branch. Desperation took over. Clara tried to go down to the village to seek help, but when she tried to use the car, they realized that the tires had been slashed. The road was blocked by fallen logs, making any quick escape impossible. Fear turned to paranoia. Helena found a second entrance to the cabin's basement, locked from the outside. Inside were boxes containing personal belongings from other tourists, backpacks, cameras, clothes, and even identity documents. In one of the boxes, a new, even more recent diary recounted the same pattern of stalking, surveillance, and disappearance. He watches us every night, read one of the last pages, and waits for the moment when we are most vulnerable. The next night, John woke up with the feeling that he was being watched. Looking out the window, he saw a figure standing among the trees, holding a flashlight. The light traveled through the cottage, illuminating each window until it settled on the room where they were. The group locked themselves in, piling furniture against the door, but they heard insistent knocking and the sound of heavy footsteps on the roof. The terror reached its peak when Clara realized that all the windows were locked from the outside, making any escape impossible. The Watcher, using his knowledge of the terrain and the house, began to manipulate the group, cutting off the power, blocking exits, and leaving threatening notes under the door. "You will not leave here." Helena, in panic, tried to break a window with a chair, but the glass was reinforced. At dawn, the group, exhausted and desperate, decided to risk everything. Using an iron bar from the basement, they managed to force open one of the side doors and ran through the frozen forest, guided only by the weak light of dawn. They heard footsteps behind them, branches breaking, and the heavy breathing of their pursuer. After hours of running, Clara, Joao, and Helena reached a road where they were rescued by a truck driver. The police were called and found the cabin full of evidence: diaries, belongings from previous victims, marks of struggle, and signs of constant surveillance. The watchman was never found, and the case gained international attention, becoming a grim warning to tourists seeking extreme isolation. For Clara, Joao, and Helena, the experience left deep scars and the certainty that in the mountains the biggest mistake can be to trust in silence and solitude, because there's always someone watching, waiting for the right moment to attack. Hey guys, the stories about rented houses in the middle of nowhere are spine-chilling, aren't they? If you're enjoying these suspenseful, intense stories, take a quick break, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more spine-chilling content. Now, let's get back to the next stories. There's still a lot of tension ahead. 4. The Locked Room. The Austrian countryside, winter 2023. A blizzard was raging in the small village of Hallstatt when 4 friends, Raphael, Elisa, Tomas, and Ingrid, arrived at the rental house they had booked for a weekend getaway. The cottage, secluded between mountains and forests, seemed like the perfect retreat. A roaring fireplace, small windows, and thick curtains to keep out the cold. The host, an elderly gentleman named Herr Weber, had left the key under the doormat and sent a friendly message warning that heavy snow was expected and that they should not go out at night. At first, everything seemed peaceful. The group settled in, prepared a simple dinner, and spent the first few hours laughing, playing cards, and listening to music. The storm outside was growing, making it impossible to see beyond the porch. The feeling of isolation was both cozy and unsettling. During the night, the power suddenly went out, plunging the cabin into total darkness. Using flashlights, they decided to explore the house in search of candles and supplies. That was when Tomas noticed a locked door at the end of the hallway, different from the others, heavy with a double lock and scratch marks on wood. Curiosity grew. The group tried to force the door open, but it resisted. Raphael found an old set of keys in the kitchen and, after several attempts, managed to unlock the door. What they found on the other side shocked them. The room was small, with walls covered in thick wood, no windows, and iron bars attached to the floor. In the corner, there was a dirty mattress, rusty chains, handcuffs, and deep marks on the walls, as if someone had tried to escape. On a shelf, old diaries recounted, in shaky writing, days of captivity, hunger, and fear. Terror took over. Elisa, leafing through one of the diaries, read reports of victims held there for weeks, always describing the jailer as a man with a hoarse voice who only appeared at night. Ingrid found a box with personal objects, watches, bracelets, photos of people who had disappeared in the region. The group realized that the house had been used, until recently, as a hiding place for kidnappings. Their fear increased when they heard heavy footsteps outside, muffled by the snow. The storm prevented them from escaping. The power had not returned, and there was no cell phone signal. Raphael suggested that they lock themselves in a room together, but Tomas realized that the interior doors could be locked from the outside. The group began to suspect that their host, Herr Weber, might be the former prison guard or someone connected to him. Tensions grew when, in the early hours of the morning, they heard knocking on the front door and footsteps circling the house. The group tried to improvise weapons and blocked the entrances with furniture. At one point, Elisa saw a shadow pass by the kitchen window, and Tomas heard someone trying to force open the back door. The terror reached its peak when a hoarse voice echoed from outside. "You shouldn't have opened that door." The group realized they were being watched and hunted. For hours, they heard break-ins, banging, and the sound of chains dragging in the snow. Ingrid found an old radio in the attic and tried to call for help, but all she could hear was static and distant voices. The group took turns keeping watch, expecting the worst. Time seemed distorted. Each minute seemed like an eternity, with the wind howling and the house creaking under the force of the storm. The next morning, the storm began to die down, but the road was still blocked. The group decided to try to escape through the forest, even though they risked getting lost. As they ran through the snow, they saw fresh footprints heading in the opposite direction. Looking back, Elisa saw a tall man in a dark coat with a hidden face, watching from the porch. After hours of exhausting walking, they managed to reach the village, where they found shelter and called the police. The investigation revealed even more disturbing details. In a locked room, police found fingernail marks on the walls, scraps of fabric stuck to the bars, and never sent farewell letters. The diaries, analyzed by experts, indicated that the jailer monitored the guests from afar, choosing his victims from tourists seeking solitude. The chalet was full of hidden passages and secret compartments, used to monitor and control those inside. Herr Weber, the host, was never seen again. Local residents reported seeing a similar man wandering the forest in the following nights, but he disappeared without a trace. The case gained international attention, becoming a warning to travelers about the dangers of isolated rental homes. The house was sealed off, but reports of shadows and lights on continued to surface among neighbors, fueling the legend of the locked room. For Raphael, Elisa, Tomas, and Ingrid, the experience left deep scars and the certainty that behind locked doors and silent walls, real horrors can hide, and that sometimes the biggest mistake is opening the wrong door. 5. The House of Drones. Remote Scotland, summer 2024. A group of 5 friends, Clara, Miguel, Sophia, Lucas, and Anna, decided to rent a modern, secluded house for a weekend of relaxation and fun. The house, situated in an area surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills, promised comfort, cutting-edge technology, and complete privacy. The listing highlighted smart systems, automation, a heated pool, and panoramic views of the valley. It all sounded perfect for days of relaxation and nights of partying away from the world. That first night, as they prepared dinner and laughed on the porch, Clara noticed blinking lights in the sky. They were small, silent drones, flying in coordinated patterns over the property. At first, the group thought they were some kind of environmental monitoring or security detail, but the feeling of being watched quickly intensified. The drones seemed to respond to their movements, adjusting their routes to maintain constant surveillance. Lucas joked that they were in a big brother of the forest, but the joke soon wore off. During the following day, they tried to ignore the drones, enjoying the pool, sauna, and wide spaces of the house. However, they began to notice that the doors and windows, despite being modern, had locking systems that seemed to be controlled remotely. In an attempt to go out to explore the area, they found the front door locked, even with the key in hand. They tried the windows, but they were all blocked from the inside with reinforced glass. Frustration and fear began to take hold of the group, who realized that they were trapped. Tensions escalated when anonymous messages began arriving on their cell phones, describing in precise detail every move they made inside the house. The messages contained instructions for them to play a game, a deadly challenge where every mistake could cost them dearly. The group tried to turn off their appliances, but the messages continued to arrive through devices connected to the house's network, such as the television, the sound system, and even the thermostat. The game consisted of a series of tasks and puzzles that had to be solved in order to unlock the house's exits. Each task was monitored by drones, which transmitted real-time images to an unknown group. The psychological pressure was immense, and the feeling that every move was being watched brought them to the brink of collapse. During one of the tasks, Sophia tried to escape through the second-floor window, but was stopped by a drone that fired an irritating gas, forcing her to go back inside. On another occasion, Miguel tried to use his cell phone to call for help, but the signal was blocked by a device installed in the house, which created a kind of technological isolation bubble. Clara realized that even the lighting system was manipulated remotely. Lights would flash, turn off or on during the most tense moments of the tasks, further disorienting the group. With each new challenge, the group was forced to make decisions under pressure, solve complex puzzles, search for objects hidden in locked rooms, and even face physical tests, all under the watchful eye of drones. In one of the challenges, Lucas had to cross the pool at night, while drones flew low, emitting shrill sounds and dazzling lights. Anna, in panic, tried to break one of the cameras, but immediately received a threatening message. With each act of rebellion, the game becomes more difficult. Fear turned into paranoia. They began to distrust each other, believing that someone in the group might be collaborating with the game controllers. Miguel, who was trying to remain calm, began to investigate the devices in the house, discovering that the automation system was connected to an external server, inaccessible by conventional methods. The sabotage attempts were quickly neutralized, and the group was punished with even more dangerous tasks. On the last night, the group managed to decipher the final riddle, which unlocked the main door. However, when they tried to leave, they were confronted by a masked man who revealed himself to be the person in charge of the house and the game. He explained that the place was a trap for people considered undesirable, and that the game was a form of entertainment for a select group who paid to watch and manipulate the victims. The man showed recordings of other groups that did not survive the challenge, increasing the friends' despair even more. The fight for survival was intense. The group used the knowledge they had gained during the game to disarm traps and confront the attacker. They managed to escape through the nearby forest, injured and traumatized, but alive. The feeling of relief was mixed with the constant fear that the man might still be chasing them. They walked for hours until they found a road, where they were finally rescued by a local driver. The police were called and, upon investigating the house, found sophisticated surveillance equipment, drones, and live streaming footage. The perpetrator disappeared, and the case gained international attention, serving as a warning to travelers about the dangers of renting isolated properties and extreme surveillance. Local and international media covered the case extensively, highlighting the sophistication of the surveillance system and the cruelty of the game. Documentaries and investigative reports have attempted to uncover the identity of the perpetrator, but he remains missing, a digital ghost who manipulates his victims from a distance. The group underwent extensive psychological treatment after their escape to overcome the trauma. Each reported frequent nightmares, a constant feeling of being watched, and a deep distrust of isolated places and surveillance technology. The experience changed their lives forever, driving them away from adventures and traveling to remote locations. Reports from local residents continue to emerge of drones still circling the area, strange lights, and unexplained sounds at night. The house has been sealed off by authorities, but the mystery and fear remain, fueling urban legends about the House of Drones. Security and criminology experts have analyzed the case, highlighting the importance of being alert to signs of excessive surveillance and technological manipulation in isolated properties. They warn that criminals can use advanced technology to control and manipulate victims, creating psychological and physical traps that are difficult to escape. For Clara, Miguel, Sophia, Lucas, and Anna, the experience was a turning point, leading them to become advocates for travel safety and to warn others about the dangers lurking in seemingly safe places. The story of the drone house remains a grim reminder that even in the middle of nowhere, danger can be closer than you think, and that surveillance can be the worst prison. 6. The Silent Neighbor. Rural England, autumn 2023. The Thompson family, John, his wife Emily, and their 2 children, Alice and Michael, decided to rent a secluded cottage in the countryside for a weekend away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The property, an old stone building surrounded by fields and forests, seemed like the perfect retreat for relaxation and nature, far from any urban surroundings or noise. Upon arriving, they were greeted by absolute silence, broken only by the distant sound of the wind and the rustling of leaves. From the first day, something seemed off. An elderly man with a stern appearance and a piercing gaze lived in the house next door, an old building partially hidden by trees and bushes. He watched the Thompson house with an almost obsessive attention, appearing at different points on the property, always silent, never directly interacting, but always present. At night, lights would flicker in the house next door, and shadows would move between the trees, as if the man were patrolling the perimeter. For the first few days, the family tried to ignore their neighbor, attributing his behavior to loneliness and the routine of the countryside. However, they soon began to notice disturbing signs. Fresh footprints near the windows, broken branches beneath the windows of the children's bedroom, and a distant sound of footsteps that seemed to accompany their movements. John noticed that every time they went for a walk, their neighbor would appear somewhere in the countryside, standing still, watching in silence. When John tried to use the landline to call the city, he discovered that the lines were down. His cell phone had no signal, and the internet router didn't work, even with all the lights on. They tried using two-way radios, but the frequencies seemed blocked, always invaded by static or distant voices. The feeling of isolation intensified when they realized that their strange neighbor had control over the communications in the area. Worried, Emily tried to leave to seek help in the nearby village, but the path was blocked by fallen trees and newly installed fences, as if someone had prepared the ground to prevent any escape. The family realized that they were trapped, watched, and manipulated by this man who seemed willing to do anything to maintain his isolated territory. Fear grew as the family's routine was invaded by small signs that they were being watched. Children's toys would move, food would disappear from the pantry, and internal doors would be mysteriously locked during the night. At night, the silent neighbor would shine flashlights on the Thompsons' house, watching their every move. On one occasion, Alice saw the man standing at the edge of the woods, holding a radio transmitter and speaking in a low voice, coordinating something invisible. Fear gripped the family, who began to hide and avoid all visual contact. Michael, the youngest son, began to have nightmares, saying that he saw the neighbor looking out of his bedroom window every night. They tried to send distress messages using smoke signals and lights, but the neighbor quickly suppressed any signals by using devices to jam communications. The psychological tension grew with each passing hour, with the family living in a constant state of alert, not knowing when or how the neighbor would act. On one particularly tense night, John heard footsteps in the attic and found muddy footprints on the floor, as if someone had entered the house while they were sleeping. Things came to a head when Emily found an anonymous letter under her door, written in letters cut from newspapers. "You don't belong here. Leave, or you'll never leave again." The group tried to stay together, blocking doors and windows, but their neighbor always seemed one step ahead, manipulating the environment to increase fear and despair. At a critical moment, John managed to find an old ham radio in the garage and, with much effort, managed to transmit a distress message to a friend in town. The answer came hours later, when a police car appeared on the dirt road, forcing the neighbor to retreat to his property. The man was last seen watching the family from afar, before disappearing into the woods. Police investigated the area and discovered that the neighbor, a reclusive man named Harold, had installed sophisticated equipment to monitor and control local communications. He had a history of obsessive behavior and had previously been accused of threatening local residents to maintain his isolation. In his home, they found radios, signal jammers, hidden cameras, and records of every guest who had stayed at the neighboring house over the past few years. The case gained repercussion in the local and national media, serving as a warning to families seeking refuge in isolated areas. For the Thompsons, the experience left deep scars and the certainty that, even in seemingly peaceful places, danger can lurk, silent, observant, and willing to do anything to protect its territory. The house was sealed off, and local residents still talk about the silent neighbor, who turned isolation into a weapon and turned the countryside into a territory of fear and surveillance. 7. Or manipulated GPS. Central Europe, fall 2023. A group of 5 young people, Anna, Bruno, Carla, Diego, and Elisa, decided to take a weekend trip to a secluded house in the mountains, seeking to escape their routine and reconnect with nature. Using a GPS app, they followed the directions to the address provided by the host, a seemingly peaceful place perfect for relaxation. The trip started out lively, with laughter and music in the car, while the GPS guided them along winding and increasingly deserted roads. As they approached their destination, the landscape changed. The trees became denser, the houses more spaced out, and the cell phone signal gradually disappeared. The GPS, however, remained steady, pointing the way to a dirt road that led to an old house, surrounded by a wooden fence and a rusty gate. When they arrived, they noticed that the house looked abandoned, with dirty windows and doors creaking in the wind. The group felt a chill down their spines, but their tiredness and desire to rest made them ignore the feeling. They entered and found a simple but cozy interior, with old furniture and an unlit fireplace. They decided to spend the night there, without imagining what awaited them. On the very first night, they began to realize that something was wrong. The GPS, which had previously indicated the route accurately, now showed confusing and contradictory routes. They tried to use their cell phones to call for help, but there was no signal. The doors and windows seemed to be locked from the inside, and any attempt to leave was thwarted by unexpected obstacles. Fallen branches blocked the road, and the gate to the property was locked with a new padlock. During the early hours of the morning, they heard noises coming from outside, slow footsteps, the creaking of chains, and the sound of a low voice whispering names. Fear took hold of the group, who realized that they were being watched and that someone had planned every detail to keep them trapped there. As they explored the house, they found disturbing evidence. Cameras hidden in everyday objects, wires that appeared to control the door locks, and an audio system that transmitted sounds to the outside. They also discovered that the address provided on the GPS had been deliberately changed, taking them to an isolated and unknown location, far from any help. The group tried to organize themselves to escape, but each attempt was thwarted by traps and constant surveillance. Tensions grew with each passing hour, with internal arguments, growing fear, and the feeling that time was against them. The house, which had seemed like a refuge, had become a carefully planned prison. During the day, the group tried to remain calm, but anxiety and fear manifested themselves in suspicious looks and silent discussions. Anna, the most cautious, insisted on analyzing every detail of the house, while Bruno tried to keep the group's spirits up with jokes, even if forced. Carla and Diego explored the surroundings, trying to find an escape route, but always came back empty-handed and with worried expressions. The next morning, Elisa found a diary hidden under a loose floorboard. The pages revealed accounts of other victims, describing the same pattern: GPS-guided arrival, isolation, surveillance, and disappearance. The diary ended with a warning: do not trust the path. It is the trap. The atmosphere became even more tense when, at dusk, the group realized that they were being monitored in real time. Drones began to fly over the house, hovering near the windows and following any movement on the grounds. The sound of the engines was constant, and images of the young people appeared on screens spread throughout the house, transmitted by an internal surveillance system. The feeling of helplessness was total. In an attempt to escape, Diego tried to break down one of the back doors, but was surprised by a burst of tear gas released by a hidden mechanism. Carla, when trying to jump out of a window, was stopped by iron bars that appeared automatically. The group realized that each escape attempt was anticipated and blocked, as if someone was controlling everything from a distance, watching and reacting to every move. The following night was marked by extreme tension. The attacker, using the audio system, began sending threatening messages. No one leaves without being seen. Every mistake will be punished. The young people began to distrust each other, fearing that one of them might be collaborating with the person responsible for the kidnapping. Fear turned into paranoia, and the group almost broke up in arguments and accusations. The height of terror came when Bruno mysteriously disappeared after going out to fetch water. The group found only his coat and drag marks on the kitchen floor. Tensions reached their limit, and Anna, Carla, Diego, and Elisa decided to risk everything in a last attempt to escape. Using information found in the diary and analyzing the security system, they managed to deactivate part of the electronic locks and open a side window. The escape was desperate. The attacker released guard dogs and drones chased them through the forest, transmitting images and coordinating the hunt. The group ran for hours, injured and exhausted, until they found a road where they were finally rescued by a truck driver who was passing through the region. Police investigated the home and uncovered a sophisticated scheme. The owner, a reclusive man with a history of crime, manipulated the GPS and security system to lure and capture victims, keeping detailed records of each group. He disappeared before authorities arrived, and the case gained international attention, serving as a warning to travelers about the dangers of blindly trusting technology and rental ads. For Anna, Bruno, Carla, Diego, and Elisa, the experience left deep scars and the certainty that, even guided by reliable signs, danger can be lurking, waiting for the right moment to attack. And so we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving rented houses in the middle of nowhere. So, which one scared you the most? Will any of them make you think twice before renting a secluded place to rest? Tell us in the comments which was your favorite. If you enjoyed this dive into the darker side of isolation, don't forget to leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and encourages me to bring you more spine-chilling stories. And if you're not a subscriber yet, take advantage now to subscribe and activate the bell.